All right, everybody, welcome back. It's episode 53 of Book to Read, and today we're going to be diving deep into a true classic.
A big one.
On the Road by Jack Kerouac.
Yeah, a real classic, On the Road. We're going to be talking about the themes, some of the insights, and just generally what makes this book tick.
Yes, exactly. So if you are reading this book for a book club, or you've just always wanted to read it but maybe felt a little intimidated or whatever, or maybe you read it in high school and you're like, I don't remember a thing, hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you're going to sound super smart at your next book club meeting.
Absolutely. You'll be able to drop some knowledge on your friends.
And if you're looking for even more ways to connect with other book lovers, especially those who love Kerouac as much as we do, make sure to check out the Bookspace app. It's a great way to find people to discuss books with and share your favorite quotes.
Oh yeah, and you can track your reading progress too.
And organize your library.
Yes. It's amazing. Okay, but for now, let's get back to On the Road. So picture this. It's post-World War II America. You've got this sense of restlessness in the air. People are questioning everything.
Yeah, everything's changing. Things are moving fast.
Exactly. And that's where we meet our narrator, Sal Paradise. He's a young writer.
Yeah, a budding writer wants to break free from the everyday, you know.
Totally. And then bam! Dean Moriarty enters the picture, fresh off a cross-country bus trip.
Oh, Dean. What a character.
Talk about restless energy. Dean is the embodiment of it.
Right. And he just lands right in this, well, let's be honest, kind of grimy New York City apartment.
Kerouac describes this place as an evil gray New York pad. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know.
It's so far from like the wide open spaces that Dean seems to crave.
Absolutely. But here's the thing. When Sal first meets Dean, he describes him as looking like a young Gene Autry, you know, like lean, blue-eyed, kind of a classic cowboy look.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I can see that. Like the ultimate symbol of freedom.
Exactly. And that's so important because it speaks to that romanticized vision of the West that really fueled the Beat generation.
Right. So you've got this guy who represents this like ideal of freedom.
Yeah.
And yet he's stuck in this cramped apartment in the city.
That tension, that contrast, it's like the perfect setup for an adventure.
Oh, for sure. And an adventure is exactly what they get.
They hit the road.
Yeah.
And it's not just any road trip. It's this spontaneous, episodic journey across America.
Yeah. They meet all sorts of people along the way. It's like a snapshot of America in the 1950s.
Oh, yeah. And these encounters, they're not just random. They represent this desire to connect with people from all walks of life, to experience the world in its rawest form.
Absolutely. I mean, they meet everyone. There's this raspy-voiced farmer in the glass.
Oh, yeah, I remember that guy. His laughter, Kerouac describes it as echoing across the plain.
And then there's this, like, philosophical hitchhiker with a red nose who's just full of life.
Right. And even a group of Omaha Indians who, as Kerouac puts it, had nowhere to go and nothing to do.
So many different people, so many stories.
It's like they're piecing together a tapestry of America through these encounters.
And one place that keeps popping up on their journey is Denver.
Denver, that becomes like their hub, you know? It's like the center of the Beat scene.
Right. It's where they connect with other key figures like Chad King, Carlo Marx.
And the infamous Old Bull Lee, don't forget him.
Oh, how could we forget Old Bull Lee? So much of the book is just like these late night conversations fueled by jazz, maybe some other things, and just this deep desire to figure out, like, what does it all mean? You know?
Exactly. It's all about pushing boundaries, exploring new ideas, and challenging conventional thinking.
There's this one quote from Carlo Marx's poetry that I think really gets at the heart of Dean's character. He calls Dean a child of the rainbow who bears his torment in his agonized Priapus.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. It's so layered. Like, on the surface, you've got this image of Dean as this vibrant, free-spirited guy.
Right, like a rainbow.
Exactly. But then there's this underlying sense of pain, of restlessness that's driving him.
It's like he's trying to outrun something, but he can't quite escape it.
Absolutely. And that tension, that duality, it's what makes Dean such a fascinating character.
And it feeds into this bigger theme in the book, this struggle between wanting stability, you know, like a home and a family, and then that pull of the open road.
That yearning for freedom, for something more.
Yeah, and it's not just Dean who's grappling with this, right? Sal feels it too.
Oh, absolutely. Remember his relationship with Terry, that Mexican girl he meets in California? She represents this more grounded way of life.
Yeah, like a connection to the earth.
Exactly. And Sal is drawn to that, but ultimately...
The road calls to him.
He can't resist it. And then there's that whole episode where Sal ends up working as the night guard at a military barracks. It's such a departure from his usual, free-spirited self.
It's like this little glimpse into a different side of America.
Yeah, like the rigid structure, the disillusionment that a lot of young people were feeling at the time.
And then you've got Remy Boncourt, Sal's old prep school friend, with his crazy schemes and his love for Dostoevsky, just adds this whole other layer of absurdity to the situation.
Oh, Remy. He's such a great character, always stirring things up. But speaking of stirring things up, we can't forget about Dean's personal life.
Oh boy, yeah, that's a whole other story. Multiple marriages, kids, always running from something.
It's like his frenetic energy extends to every aspect of his life.
He can't seem to stay in one place or with one person for too long.
It's both exhilarating and exhausting to watch,
Totally. And there's this one moment when he returns to Denver with his new wife, Camille, and their baby.
You think he might finally settle down, but
Nope. He can't fight that urge to run.
it's like a cycle he can't break free from. He runs away, then he seeks connection, but he always ends up back on the road.
And that final encounter between Sal and Dean in New York is just so bittersweet.
Oh, I know. Dean's about to head back to San Francisco, but there's still this restless energy about him,
Like he's still searching for something.
It's like he knows he might never find it, but he can't stop looking.
So much to unpack in this book. We've only just scratched the surface. But before we go any deeper, let's take a quick break.
All right, so we can't talk about On the Road without talking about jazz.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, jazz is practically like a character in the book.
Totally. The energy, the rhythm, the improvisation, it's like the soundtrack to their journey.
Right. Like, think about those smoky jazz clubs they're always hanging out in. It's like Kerouac's writing is trying to capture that same feeling, that same energy.
Yeah, that feeling of like being in the moment, pushing boundaries. And jazz was all about that, right? Rejecting the old rules, embracing individual expression.
Exactly. Which, of course, is totally in line with like the whole beat philosophy.
Totally. And then you've got, the whole drug scene.
Right. Kerouac doesn't shy away from that at all. Benzodrine, marijuana, even heroin.
I mean, it was a different time, right? The 50s.
Yeah.
People viewed drugs differently back then.
For sure. For the beats, it was part of this whole thing about like exploring consciousness, expanding your perception.
Right, like breaking free from conventional thinking. But it's important to note that Kerouac doesn't glamorize drug use.
Yeah.
He shows the good and the bad.
Yeah, the highs and the lows, the euphoria and the come downs.
He doesn't sugarcoat it. He lets the reader decide what to make of it.
Okay, but let's talk about Sal for a second. Because, Dean might be the most outwardly exciting character, but Sal's the one telling the story.
Right, and Sal's on his own journey too. He's trying to figure out who he is, where he fits in.
Yeah, he's absorbing everything, watching, listening, thinking.
He's the observer, the one who's trying to make sense of it all. And his relationship with Dean, that's a huge part of his journey.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's complicated, right? He admires Dean, but he also kind of envies him.
And sometimes he's frustrated by him.
Totally. Like, Dean's this force of nature, but he can also be really destructive.
And Sal sees that. He's both drawn to and repelled by Dean's way of life.
Yeah, it's this constant push and pull.
Speaking of push and pull, remember that scene in the Mexican brothel? Talk about pushing boundaries.
Oh yeah, that was a wild one. Like sensory overload.
It's like they're trying to lose themselves completely in the moment.
Escape from their everyday lives. But it's also kind of a turning point for Sal, I think.
You think so?
Yeah, because he starts to wonder if Dean's constant pursuit of pleasure is actually, fulfilling.
That's an interesting point. And then there's that other scene, the one where Dean's driving through the jungle at night with his headlights off.
Oh man, that one is so intense.
It's like a metaphor for their whole approach to life, right? Embracing the unknown, taking risks.
Living on the edge.
Exactly. But as the story goes on, we see Dean starting to crack a little,
Yeah, all that frenetic energy starts to take its toll.
His relationships fall apart.
He makes a lot of messes. And there's that really sad scene where he breaks down and cries after leaving one of his wives.
Oh yeah, that's heartbreaking because it shows that underneath all that bravado, Dean's actually really vulnerable.
Yeah. He's not just this, cartoon character of rebellion.
Right. He's a real person with real feelings. And it brings us back to that theme of, societal expectations versus individual freedom.
Because Dean just can't conform.
He can't settle down. And that's both his strength and his weakness.
He's the ultimate symbol of freedom, but it comes at a price.
That's the thing about On the Road. It makes you question, what does freedom really mean?
Yeah. What are they actually searching for? Is it freedom from responsibility? From society's rules? Or is it something deeper?
It's a big question, and the book doesn't really give you any easy answers.
Which is what makes it so great, I think. It makes you think.
It stays with you long after you finish reading it,
And it makes you want to go on your own adventure.
even if it's just a metaphorical one.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Sal and Dean, but On the Road is filled with all these other fascinating characters, too.
Oh yeah, like Old Bull Lee.
Oh, Old Bull Lee. Now there's a character.
He's this total contradiction, right? Brilliant mind, but also trapped in this cycle of addiction.
Yeah, he's a writer, philosopher, a drug addict, and kind of a mentor to Sal and Dean, all rolled into one.
He represents a different side of the Beat generation, I think, like the intellectual side, the thirst for knowledge.
Yeah, and he's also hilarious. Remember that story he tells about his aunt who lost her finger in the Casbah?
Oh my gosh, yes. That was so funny.
It's like he can find humor in even the most absurd situations.
He's a great storyteller, always blurring the lines between reality and fantasy.
And then you've got Carlo Marx, the poet.
Oh, Carlo. He's the deep thinker of the group.
Yeah, always analyzing everything, trying to understand Sal and Dean's motivations.
He's the one who delivers that line about Dean being a child of the rainbow, remember?
Yeah, that's such a powerful image. It captures so much about Dean's inner turmoil.
Like he's trying to escape his own pain by constantly seeking out new experiences.
But as we've seen, that doesn't always work.
Sometimes you have to face your demons head on.
It's amazing how, like, even the side characters in this book, they're not just there to fill space.
Right, they all have their own like little stories and personalities.
And they each kind of like reflect different aspects of like the whole Beat thing.
Totally, and it all ties back to those big themes we keep talking about.
Yeah, like, one that I kept thinking about was the whole father-son thing.
Oh yeah, Dean's search for his dad, like that runs through the entire book.
It's like this gaping hole in his life.
Yeah.
And he's trying to fill it with everything else.
Yeah, with the road, with women, with, just experience.
But he can never quite outrun that absence.
Exactly. And Sal has his own issues with his dad too, remember?
Oh, right. Yeah, he does.
It's like they're both kind of haunted by these like father figures.
Yeah, even though they're trying so hard to break free from the past.
It makes you think about how much our families, even when they're not there, they still shape who we are.
Right. And then I think the physical journey, like the actual road trip, is such a big part of that too.
Whoa, totally. They're constantly on the move, pushing themselves to the limit.
Yeah, driving all night.
Yeah.
It's like they're trying to outrun something.
Or maybe outrun themselves.
Yeah, maybe both.
And that sense of urgency that Kerouac captures, you really feel it.
So at the end of all this, where does Sal end up? I mean, after all that searching and all that running,
Well, he goes back to New York.
he does.
Yeah, and it seems like he chooses a more like conventional life,
He does. Wow.
Settles down, starts a family, gets a job.
Wow, that's so different from like the crazy Dean Moriarty life.
Right, but it's not necessarily like a rejection of everything they went through.
Right.
It's more like Sal realizing that he needs something different.
Yeah, like his own path.
Exactly, and maybe he's figuring out that like meaning isn't always found in those big crazy experiences.
Yeah, sometimes it's in the everyday stuff.
In the connections you make.
That's a good point.
And it shows that there's not just one right way to live, What works for Dean doesn't work for Sal.
Everyone's got to find their own balance.
Between freedom and responsibility, between adventure and stability.
So it's not a sad ending.
No, not at all. It's actually kind of hopeful.
Yeah.
It's like saying that even the wildest souls can find a place to land.
A place to call home.
Exactly, and I think that's a really powerful message.
So, On the Road, it's more than just a wild road trip story.
Yeah, it's about so much more. It's about freedom and longing and trying to find your place in the world.
And it makes you think about your own life. Like, what do you value? What are you searching for?
And it reminds us that the journey is just as important as the destination.
Well said.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our road trip for today.
It's been a wild ride.
But all good road trips have to come to an end eventually.
That's true.
But hey, if you're looking for more ways to like connect with other book lovers and keep the conversation going,
Make sure to check out the Bookspace app.
it's the perfect place to share your thoughts, find new books, and just geek out over all things Kerouac.
Absolutely. So until next time, happy reading, everyone.
And keep on exploring.